All right, welcome. Today, we're diving deep, really deep into how students learn, specifically self-regulated learning. It's all about how students take charge of their own learning,
Yeah, exactly. And we've got some fascinating research to explore, like really looking closely at what's going on inside students' heads as they're working on stuff.
like seriously tracking their thoughts and feelings, even watching what they're actually doing step by step.
It's pretty amazing. And what's cool is they're using all these new methods to do it, like interactive software, and
Mm.
asking these quick little questions, like these laser focused questions to see how learning is happening in real time.
It's like catching learning in the act.
Yeah, and that's kind of the whole point. It's this idea of micro level analysis.
Yeah.
So instead of just seeing how someone did on a test, we're getting up close and personal with their thoughts, feelings, and actions as they're grappling with the material.
So it's like instead of judging the finished product, you're watching the whole creative process unfold, right?
Exactly. And our mission today is to really unravel how students become these active learners, not just passive sponges. How do they use their thoughts, their motivations, even their behaviors to make learning happen?
And I'm guessing things like interest, whether there's actually into the topic, and what their goals are, probably play a big role.
You got it.
Okay, so let's break this down a bit. What exactly is self-regulated learning?
Right. It sounds a bit jargony, I know, but the idea itself is pretty common sense. A good definition, I think, comes from Schunk and Zimmerman. They say, and I'm quoting here, self-regulated learners are metacognitively, motivationally, and behaviorally active participants in their own learning process.
Great. Okay, so unpacking that a bit. Metacognitively, that's like they're aware of their own thinking.
Yeah, exactly. They're thinking about how they think.
And then motivationally, well, obviously, they want to learn.
Right. That's a big part of it for sure.
And behaviorally, so they're taking concrete steps to guide their learning. It's not just wishing for it, it's
Mhm.
doing something about it.
Right.
So self-regulated learning, it's more than just showing up and spacing out in class.
Way more. And Bokertz, another researcher in this area, she adds another layer to this. She defines self-regulation as the systematic thoughts, actions, and feelings directed at personal learning goals.
So it's not just random, there's intentionality behind it.
Definitely. And she emphasizes two key parts here: aptitude and outcome. Aptitude is all about the student connecting with the material, finding it meaningful.
Okay, so it's like why they want to learn it.
Yeah, yeah. And then outcome, that's the part where they're actually taking those steps, putting in the effort to reach those goals.
It's like, okay, this matters to me and here's how I'm going to make it happen.
Right.
So it's not just about how much effort you put in, it's about having that sense of purpose and then taking those steps.
Exactly. And then there's Pinterest's model, which is, well, it's pretty comprehensive. He sees self-regulated learning as this mix of cognitive, motivational, emotional, even social factors. And he organizes them into four phases.
Wow, that sounds pretty involved.
It is, but it really paints a complete picture. And while he was initially studying college students, these principles, they apply to everyone, really.
Oh, that's interesting. So whether you're a kindergartner or a PhD student, these phases are at play.
Yeah, at some level, absolutely.
All right, so lay it on me. What are these four phases?
So Pindrich, he has these four key assumptions about how self-regulated learning works. First, learners, they actively construct meaning, they set goals for themselves, and they get to choose the strategies they want to use. Second, they have the potential to really steer the direction of their learning.
Oh, so they have agency. They're not just along for the ride.
Right. Third, learning behavior. It's goal-directed, it's not random. And finally, all these self-regulatory activities, they act as a bridge between who the student is, the learning environment, and what they actually achieve.
So it's this intricate dance between personal characteristics, the context they're in, and what they manage to learn.
Exactly. It's not just one thing.
Now, you said earlier that self-regulation isn't always a good thing. That threw me off a bit.
Yeah. It's important to clarify that. When we talk about self-regulation, we're not saying it's automatically good or leads to the best results. It just means that the student's actively involved.
So they could be self-regulating in a way that's not very helpful.
Exactly. Like maybe their goals aren't great or they're using strategies that aren't working for them, but they're still actively trying to control their learning.
So self-regulation isn't a synonym for successful learning.
Right. It's about being actively engaged regardless of the outcome.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, getting back to the research, how do these researchers actually see what's going on in students' minds as they're learning? I mean, that's got to be tough, right?
Yeah, well, this is where things get really interesting. They use this interactive software. It's called Between the Lines, or BTL for short.
Okay, between the lines. Catchy?
So this software, it gives students actual learning tasks to work on. But while they're working, it throws in these questions, often single item questions, just to capture their thoughts and feelings right then and there.
Wait, single questions? Like just one quick question at a time?
Exactly. They want to tap into the learner's immediate experience. It's like a snapshot of what's going on in their head at that exact moment.
I get it. Like asking someone how they feel during a movie, not after they've left the theater.
Perfect analogy.
So you're getting a much more authentic, raw response.
Hmm.
Does this way of looking at learning connect to any other theories or ideas out there?
Actually, it does. There are some really interesting parallels between Pinterach's 4 phases and this model called the Social Information Processing Model. It was developed by Dodge and his colleagues.
Social information processing. Okay, so how do those two relate?
Well, they both kind of approach learning from an information processing perspective, and they both highlight these series of steps or phases. Just like how Pinterest talks about those 4 phases of learning, Dodge's model outlines the steps in how we understand and react in social situations.
So like how we interpret social cues and decide how to respond.
Exactly. And what's really cool is that both of these models, they're cyclical. So in Dodge's model, how a student acts in a social situation, it becomes new information that feeds back into the next cycle of interpretation.
So it's like a feedback loop.
Yeah, exactly. And in self-regulated learning, what a student does during a task can influence how they keep track of their progress and make decisions about what to do next.
It's like they're constantly adjusting and recalibrating based on what just happened.
Precisely. Both models also place a lot of importance on this idea of a database, which is basically all the prior knowledge, beliefs, experiences a person brings to the table, and that shapes each step of the process.
So it's like we're not just looking at the current task in isolation,
Yeah,
but also how their past experiences are coloring their perceptions and actions.
exactly.
All right, so let's dig deeper into Pinterach's 4 phases, and let's see what this BTL research tells us about what's actually happening in each phase. Let's start with phase 1. Forethought, planning, and activation. What's going on at that initial stage?
Okay, so phase 1. The research really zooms in on those activation processes, like what triggers things and how does the student initially perceive the task.
So it's like first impressions. How do they size up what they're about to do?
Yeah. So the idea is that when they encounter something new to learn, their first take on it activates all these evaluative processes.
Yeah.
And they're drawing on their own personal database.
So they're pulling up everything they know, everything they've experienced, and seeing how this new task fits in.
Exactly. Things like their abilities, prior knowledge, goals, even their curiosity in that moment.
Okay, so their internal radar is scanning this new thing, comparing it to everything they already have in their mental filing cabinet.
That's a good way to put it. And there's this thing called state of interest that plays a key role here. The research shows that this initial spark of interest is crucial for connecting the student to the task.
So if you're not intrigued, you're probably not going to be too invested in learning it.
Yeah. When someone is interested, it opens them up, makes them more receptive to new information.
It's like interest is the key that unlocks that learning door.
Exactly.
Okay, so what kind of things spark that interest?
Well, lots of factors, but some key ones are like general curiosity. Research has shown that students who are naturally curious are more likely to be interested in learning new things, even in reading tasks.
So if you're someone who just loves to explore and figure things out,
Yeah.
you're more likely to be engaged.
Exactly. Also, if a student already has an interest in a subject, like, say, science, they'll probably be more interested in specific topics within that domain, like a text about dolphins, for example.
Okay, so existing interests can prime them for new learning within that field.
Right. And then their prior knowledge matters too. If they already know a little bit about something, they're more likely to want to learn more. It's like having a little hook to hang new information on.
And this might sound counterintuitive, but their goals, specifically mastery-oriented goals, they also play a part in generating interest.
Yeah, that's a key finding. So if a student's goal is to truly understand and get better at something, they're actually more likely to be interested in the task itself. Ainley and Heedy and Patrick, they've done some great research on this.
So aiming for true mastery for understanding actually makes the learning process itself more appealing.
That's what the research suggests, yeah.
So it's not just about getting it done, it's about getting it right. And that mindset can actually boost their interest.
Wow. It is pretty cool. And, for teachers listening, this really highlights the importance of tapping into those natural curiosities and making the learning relevant to their lives.
Making it matter.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so we've got the spark of interest. What about those other aspects of phase one, like planning and those initial judgments students make?
Well, the research sheds light on that too. For instance, one study looked at students who were going to write a paper on a science topic. And what they found was that the students' initial interest in the topic and how much they thought they already knew about it actually predicted how confident they felt about being able to write a good paper.
It's like if you're interested and you feel like you've got a good foundation, you're more likely to approach the task with confidence. Makes sense.
Right. So those early perceptions and feelings really set the stage.
Okay, so phase one is all about those first impressions, the initial setup. What happens next? Phase two, monitoring, right?
Yeah.
How do we see students keeping track of their learning as they go?
Yeah. So monitoring, this is all about these feedback loops where students are constantly evaluating the task and making judgments about how they're doing.
So they're checking in with themselves like, how am I feeling about this? Is this making sense?
Exactly. They're assessing their interest, how confident they feel, how much control they have.
Okay, so they're not just blindly going through the motions. They're actively evaluating their progress and their experience.
Right. But here's the thing. The way this research captures these judgments, those quick questions during the task, it shows us that they're making these judgments, but not necessarily how aware they are of doing it.
Oh, I see. So it could be a conscious process
Yeah.
where they're actively thinking, okay, am I still interested?
Yeah,
Am I getting this? Or it could be more unconscious happening in the background.
exactly. We can't really tell from this type of research.
You got it. But we can still see how their judgments are changing over time.
Right. One study, for example, looked at how students rated they called it activation, basically how engaged they were, from bored to really interested.
Okay, so it's a measure of their mental energy and focus.
Yeah. And they found that this sense of activation was linked to both the specific topics of the articles they were reading and to the individual characteristics of the students.
So if a topic is personally relevant to you, you're probably going to be more engaged.
Right. And that makes sense, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You mentioned a flow study earlier, right? What did that reveal about this monitoring phase?
Oh, yeah, that one was fascinating. So they were looking at college students learning about physics online, specifically velocity and acceleration. And they tracked how students rated the challenge of the activity and how skilled they felt at understanding it.
Okay, so it's like, how hard is this? And do I feel like I'm capable of doing it?
Exactly. And what they found was that the students who actually learned the most, they called them learners, they initially reported that both the challenge and their skill level were increasing, and those ratings were closely tied together.
So they were finding it more challenging, but they also felt like they were rising to the occasion.
Exactly. But then when a more difficult concept was introduced, negative acceleration, their sense of challenge kept going up, but how skilled they felt actually went down.
Ah, so they hit a wall, the material got tougher, and their confidence took a hit.
Yeah, and this is interesting, right? Because it shows how important it is for learners to track not just how difficult they find something, but also how competent they feel. That balance is key.
If that balance is off, it can be a warning sign. Like
Yeah.
maybe you need to adjust your approach or ask for help.
Absolutely. And this kind of monitoring can help students catch those mismatches early on.
So they can course correct before they get totally lost.
Exactly.
What about the students who didn't learn as much? Did the study look at them too?
Yeah, they did. And they had this group called changers. These were students who consistently got answers wrong, but they kept switching to different wrong answers.
So they were actively engaged, but not in a productive way.
Right. And these changers, they felt that the activity was really challenging, but they also reported feeling low in skill throughout the whole thing. So from the very beginning, there was this mismatch between the task and what they felt capable of.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So even though they were trying different answers, they didn't seem to feel like they were getting closer to the right one. Okay, so monitoring, it's not just about checking your understanding. It's about evaluating your confidence, your control, and how well you're matching up to the task. It's pretty complex. So we've got getting started and staying on track. Now let's talk about the third phase, control. How do we see students taking charge of their own learning in real time?
Okay, so control. This is about students making choices, making decisions about their learning.
So it's not just reacting, it's actively shaping the process.
Right. And the research suggests that things like, a persistent lack of interest, that can be a big red flag.
Like if they're just not feeling it, they're going to check out.
Yeah. And it might lead them to try to regain control by stopping altogether or switching to a different task, if that's an option.
So feeling uninterested can be a trigger for taking action, even if that action is disengaging.
Yeah, unfortunately. One study actually gave students the choice to continue reading these popular science and culture texts or to stop after each section.
Okay, so they had the power to decide how much they wanted to engage.
Exactly, and what they found was that students who were more interested were much more likely to keep reading, while those who were bored, they were more inclined to quit.
So it really comes down to whether they're invested or not.
Yeah, that connection between how interested they felt and whether they stuck with it, it really shows that control phase in action.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Okay, last phase, reflection. How does this research capture students looking back on their learning?
So, reflection. This is about thinking back on the learning process after it's happened. One study used these reflection questions that were related to the feeling of flow.
Flow, like that state of being totally absorbed and in the zone.
Exactly. So they asked students about things like how absorbed they felt in the task, whether they lost track of time, how much effort it took. This was after a writing assignment.
Okay, so they were trying to tap into those subjective experiences of deep engagement.
Yeah. And based on the students' answers, they grouped them into those who had experienced flow and those who hadn't.
So flow versus no flow.
Right. And the interesting thing was the flow group, they had reported much higher levels of activation, meaning they felt more interested and engaged throughout the whole writing task compared to the no flow group.
So if you were really feeling it in the moment, you were more likely to look back and say, hey, I was in the zone there.
Yeah, pretty much. It suggests that how interested you feel during the process has a big impact on how you ultimately experience and remember it.
Wow. You know, it's interesting. Interest seems to be a key player in all four phases.
It really is. This research underscores the importance of interest in self-regulated learning. And some researchers, like Fredrickson, she even argues that interest is a major positive emotion because it not only opens up our thinking and encourages exploration, but it also helps us build knowledge and skills over time.
So interest isn't just a fleeting feeling. It has a real impact on what we learn and how we grow.
Absolutely. And this isn't just theory. A study that asked people about their current activity throughout the day found that adolescents who reported being more interested, they also felt more in control of their lives and were more proactive.
So interest is linked to a sense of agency
Yeah.
and a willingness to take action.
Right. Which is pretty cool, I think.
Absolutely. Okay, switching gears a bit. You mentioned that a lot of this research uses these single item measures, these really short questions. Can you talk a bit more about why they do that?
Sure. Traditionally, research on learning, it's relied on questionnaires and tests with established psychometric properties, things like reliability and validity. But when you're trying to capture someone's immediate experience, how they're feeling right now during a task, those long surveys, they just aren't practical.
Yeah, they'd be really disruptive.
Exactly. And single item measures, they give you this quick snapshot, a way to peek into their current state without interrupting the flow of their work.
Okay, so it's about getting that real-time data without throwing them off track. But how can researchers be sure that just one question is giving them accurate and meaningful information? I mean, one question that seems so limited.
Well, that's where the whole issue of validity comes in. Messick, who was a big name in assessment, he argued that validity, it's not just one thing, it's a whole picture based on different types of evidence. Like, does the measure align with other things it should? Does it diverge from things it shouldn't? What does the question actually mean to the person answering it? And what are the consequences of using it?
So it's about building a case that this one question is actually measuring what you think it's measuring.
Exactly. So, for example, with interest, if your single item measure of interest is valid, you'd expect that students who say they're very interested would also show other signs of engagement, like spending more time on the task or, maybe choosing to do more activities related to that topic.
It's like the pieces all fit together, right? The
Yeah.
different measures corroborate each other.
Exactly. And researchers, they've done these studies with single item measures of interest where they look at whether students respond differently to hypothetical situations that should naturally evoke different levels of interest. Like imagine taking a math test versus going on your dream vacation.
Okay, so two very different scenarios that should, in theory, trigger very different levels of interest.
Right. And they found that these single-item measures actually do capture those differences. They've also found that students report different levels of activation, meaning interest, when reading different types of content in ways that align with what we generally know about people's interests. So it's not random, it's consistent.
That's pretty compelling. Are these single item measures used in other fields besides education research?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like in healthcare, they use these visual analog scales, where patients mark a spot on the line to indicate their level of pain or how they're feeling emotionally.
Oh, yeah, I've seen those.
And those are commonly used, especially when you can't give them a whole long questionnaire.
Yeah, like if someone's in a lot of pain, you don't want to make them fill out a survey.
Right. And research has shown that these visual analog scales, they can be very valid, especially when compared to more detailed anxiety scales, for example. They're even used with dementia patients.
Interesting. So these simple scales can be really useful in a variety of settings.
Absolutely. And then in the field of job satisfaction, there's been a bit of debate, but research suggests that for topics that are pretty straightforward, like overall job satisfaction, a single question can be pretty effective. And often they show really strong correlations with those multi-item measures.
So for some things, keeping it simple actually works really well.
Yeah. But of course, there are some caveats, right? Some studies have found that single item scales, they don't always line up as well with longer scales when you're trying to measure more complex constructs, like how someone copes with stress or, the intensity of a feeling like flow.
So if it's multifaceted or open to interpretation, one question might not be enough.
Right, you got to be more careful in those cases. But for clear, focused questions about specific experiences, they can provide really valuable information. And practically speaking, they're quick. They don't interrupt the learning process, which is really important when you're trying to capture what's happening in the moment.
Yeah, I see the trade-off there. You have to use the right tool for the job, as they say.
Hmm.
Okay, so these single item measures, they're a neat way to get a glimpse into the learner's experience. But, it's not just about looking at those individual moments in isolation, right? This close-up analysis, it also lets researchers see patterns and sequences in how self-regulated learning unfolds over time.
Yeah, exactly. By tracking those thoughts, feelings, actions as they happen, you start to see these patterns and sequences and how different parts of the learning process influence each other.
So it's like putting the puzzle pieces together.
Yeah, exactly. Like, how do a student's overall goals relate to the specific goals they set when they're working on a particular task? Do those goals stay the same or do they change?
It's like zooming in to see the individual brushstrokes, but then zooming back out to appreciate the whole painting. You get both perspectives.
Right. And, Patrick's 2004 study, the one we talked about earlier, it showed a really clear progression from a student's general approach to learning, whether they were focused on understanding and mastery.
Yeah, like their overall learning philosophy.
Yeah. So that general approach influenced their initial interest in a specific topic, and then their interest influenced the types of goals they set while actually doing the task.
So it's like a chain reaction. Your big picture mindset shapes how you approach individual tasks.
Right. And this is consistent with other research that's shown that having a mastery-oriented mindset, it predicts both interest and future engagement.
So if you're aiming for deep understanding, not just checking boxes, you're more likely to be interested and to stick with it.
Exactly. And what's really powerful about this kind of real-time tracking, the BTL stuff, is that it can also show us how students interact with learning materials that are designed to promote self-regulated learning.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just about observing, it's about informing how we design learning experiences.
Yeah. For example, there was a study that tracked medical students using a multimedia program to learn how to do clinical interviews. And the creators of the program, they had these ideas about how the students would use the materials. But then when they looked at the electronic records, the actual clicks and choices the students made, it turned out the students weren't always using the program as intended.
So even when you think you've designed something that's going to promote self-regulated learning, it might not play out that way in practice.
Exactly. And this highlights the importance of actually monitoring the student experience, not just assuming we know what's going on in their heads. It can really help us design better learning experiences.
It's like user testing for education.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so big picture. What's the main takeaway from all of this research on self-regulated learning, this close-up view of how it all works?
I think the key takeaway is that understanding these moment-to-moment processes, how interest goals, self-monitoring all interact, that gives us incredibly valuable insights into how students actually learn.
It's like we're finally getting a glimpse behind the curtain, seeing the inner workings of their minds.
Yeah, it's like cracking the code. We see how they connect with tasks, how their motivation ebbs and flows, how they take control. And these new ways of measuring things, like the single item questions, they're proving to be really useful for capturing those
It's
experiences.
like we're finally getting the tools to study learning as it's actually happening, not just after the fact.
Exactly. And this isn't just theory, right? This research has real, practical implications for how we design learning environments.
Absolutely. So for all of you listeners out there, I want you to think back to a time when you were totally absorbed in learning something new. What sparked your initial interest? How did your goals change as you went along? What kept you motivated and focused?
Yeah, that's a great question. Reflect on your own experience.
Because that personal reflection, it can really help you connect to these ideas, these processes we've been talking about today. And we encourage you to explore further, dive deeper into the world of self-regulated learning. It's fascinating stuff.
It really is.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.